So in today's lecture, I just wanted to go over in a little bit more depth some topics from VPython. I specifically wanted to talk a little bit more about nested loops, and then I wanted to go into some details for some things about lists. I just thought that the lectures that we had posted that were associated with the problems went through these topics kind of fast, and so I wanted to really dwell on some ideas in here. So first of all, let me talk about nested loops. And you can also call nested loops a loop in a loop if you want, or a loop-to-loop, I don't care. But anyway, basically the idea here is that you're going to put a loop inside another loop, and this occasionally will help you accomplish more complex tasks. So I've created a program here called Nested Loops Example that I've shared with you. Here's the link if you'd like it. And let's just open it up and talk about what's happening. What's going to happen in this code, here it is. What's going to happen in this code, I'm going to run it for you so you can see, is I've got a white ball that starts off at the origin, and then it moves in what I think of as a raster pattern, okay? The horizontal direction, or the X direction, is my fast scan axis. It moves through X fast, and then as you can see, it moves upwards in Y as well, but it does that slower because it does a whole row in X before it moves up one bump in Y. And then it does the other row in X, and then it moves up another bump in Y. And it starts at the left-hand side of the row each time. Okay, so this is a raster scan. And X is the fast scan axis, and Y is the slow scan axis. Okay, so let's look at this and figure out what's going on. Okay, so to do this, to accomplish this, I've got these two nested loops that you see here, okay? But let me back up just a little bit. I've got my variables that change for my nested loops, and those variables are A and B, okay? Now, A is the outside loop, and it controls the slow scan axis, which is the Y-axis. And B is the fast scan axis, right? That's the fast scan, or X motion. Okay, so I create a vector I call place, which is going to be the center of my white ball that I created. Okay, so that's my place vector. And white ball is a sphere with radius 0.3, initially located at a position place, which is initially placed at the origin. And I turned on make trail so you could more easily see that raster scan pattern. Now, in each step, it's going to move over one. Okay, so I have these two vectors called X motion and Y motion, which are just vectors that move in the X for the X motion and in the Y for the Y motion. Okay? So now my outside loop is going to be my slow scan axis, okay? I'm saying, okay, while A, my slow scan axis variable, is less than 11, and then I define my rate, I want my rate nice and slow so that you can track the motion of the object. So I put the rate in each of the nested loops. That's very important. Otherwise, it looks like the ball's just randomly jumping around. So I've got the rate in each nested loop. And it's also important that you see, I want my fast scan axis, which is controlled by B, to start at the left each time. That's my raster pattern, right? So it goes all the way over in X from the left, where it starts at 0, all the way to the right. But then I want it to come back to the left to start the next row. So before I have it go through that fast scan motion, I initialize my variable for my fast scan axis each time. I start it off at B is equal to 0. Now I go into my loop for moving it through my fast scan axis. And I say, okay, while B is less than 11, here's my rate again. And now I'm going to change the placement of my white ball. Place is equal to place plus X motion. So in other words, I move it over by 1 in X. Then I make the position of white ball to match my place vector. Okay. Then I tell it to print what the coordinate is. I thought it might be nice for you to see the coordinates of the ball move in time. And then I increment my fast scan axis loop. So the way nested loops work is, see, it went here, and then it started in on this loop. When it finishes with B equals B plus 1, it's not going to go all the way back up to while A is less than 11. It's not going to go there. It's going to go to the inside loop top, okay? So it does the B thing. It starts off at B is equal to 0, right? And then it moves it over 1, right? And then it increases B by 1. It comes back up here. Now B is equal to 1, and it moves it again, right? Now B is equal to 2, and it moves it again. So it stays in this inner loop until the while loop here kicks it out, until b is not less than 11 anymore. Okay? Once b is not less than 11 anymore, the ball is all the way over at the right-hand side of that row. It gets kicked out of the loop, and now it goes here, place.x is equal to 0. Okay? So that puts the x coordinate of place right back at the left-hand side. Okay? Then it says, okay, I'm going to increase my slow scan variable a by 1, and I'm going to move my ball up 1 on my slow axis. So that causes it to move up 1 in y. Then, right, it's going to kick it back up to the top of the while loop while a is less than 11. Okay, so it started off at a is equal to 0. Now a is equal to 1, and it's still less than 11, and so it goes through the loop again. Then it comes down here, it hits this fast scan axis again, and it moves it over in x all the way to the end of the row. So it stays in the while loop until it gets kicked out, then it moves it up in 1 and y again. Okay? So that's what's happening every time. So let's run the program again and understand it. Now you can see here it's printing my place vector, so you can see exactly what's happening to each one of the variables here. You can see that it increments my x coordinate by 1, leaving the y coordinate the same until it gets kicked out at the end of the row, and then you see it moves up in y each time. Okay? So you can see it in the motion, and you can also see it in the value of the place variable, which is printed out here. All right? So that's one thing that nested loops can do for you. Of course, they can do a lot more than this. They're, you know, dream big, right? But I just wanted to show you how it's how the nesting works, and I thought this raster scanning was a nice way to illustrate that. Okay? So hopefully that helps you. Okay, now the other topic that gets kind of covered in these two videos on lists is some information about lists. And I want to just highlight these again, and mostly just for repetition's sake, because I feel like they go over some of these ideas so quickly that it's easy to miss. Okay, so first of all, remember that in VPython, in the videos, they introduce the idea of a list in VPython, and a list is just that, it's a list. Okay? And what's in the list can be whatever you want. It can be shapes like spheres or boxes or whatever. We've done that a lot in VPython, create those shapes. So shapes can be in the list. It can be numbers, okay? It can also be text strings. It can be whatever you want, okay? Now, how do you create a list? Well, you give it a name, just like a variable name, right? And then you set that variable name or your list name equal to, and then you have these square brackets that identify to VPython that this is not just a regular old variable, but this is a list variable, right? That's what the square brackets do. They tell VPython, aha, list coming up, okay? Now, here, this is Tanya's list. That's the name of my list, okay? And some stuff that I need to pick up from the grocery store. So we've got milk, bread, cat food, and coffee. I need to pick up those things, right? Now, these are text strings, so I've got them in quotation marks to identify them in text strings. So milk's in quotation, and comma, bread in quotation, and so on and so forth. So this is a text string, okay? Now, VPython, if you want to tell VPython or reference something that's in a list when you're talking to VPython, you don't have to call it by name. What you do is you tell it what number element it is in the list. But VPython starts off at 0. So 0 is going to be the first element in the list. So milk will be 0, bread will be 1, cat food will be 2, and coffee will be 3. Okay? Now, if you want to reference in the code an element in the list, so you just want to talk about bread, for example, okay? Then you would do it like this. You would say print Tanya's list and then square brackets 1. And that tells VPython, this Tanya's list 1 thing, that tells it, okay, it only wants to deal with element 1 in the list, which is bread. And then it will print bread. Okay, so I have the code over here. So this is list examples, okay? And so you can see here that I've got Tanya's list defined, and then print Tanya's list 1, right? So if I run it, just those bit here, it'll print bread. See there, it printed it. Okay? All right. Now, a little bit more. if you want to know what the length of the list is, and the length of the list is just how many items are in the list, then you can use the length command, okay? The length command is len. And then if you want to tell it what the name of the list is, you put len in regular parentheses. And then it'll tell you the name, or that means the number of items in Tanya's list. So since I had, milk, bread, coffee, and cat food, that's 4 elements in the list. And so if it says print length of Tanya's list there, print len of Tanya's list, it'll print out 4, okay? So let me show you that. So if I run it, here's the first 2 elements, print length of Tanya's list, run, and it printed 4, okay? Okay. So you can also, if you want to, and you'll need to do this for some of your homework, create an empty list. And if you want to create a list, you want to identify a name as a list or a variable as a list, then you do so by using these empty square brackets. So I called my empty list very originally, and then I said it's equal to left bracket, right bracket, square brackets. So this says, hey, I've got some stuff that I want to put into a list, but it's empty right now. You're going to put stuff in it later. That's what VPython learns from that. Okay? Now, if you need to put things in your empty list as you're doing operations within VPython, you do that with a command called append, A-P-P-E-N-D. Okay? But it's not like you do the append in terms of the way you do other functions, right? Where you put it append and then you put the in parentheses list. No, it's a little different, okay? So the syntax for how to do an append is you put the name of the list and then dot append, and then you put in regular parentheses what you want it to put in the list. All right? So the formatting for that, or the syntax for that, is a little different than some of the other commands that we've done. And so I really wanted to highlight that, okay? That in order to append something, you've got to do listname dot append, and then you put what you want to append in the parentheses there, okay? So I've done that here in this code, okay? I've created an empty list. I create an index variable I say my total is 0, right? I create a variable called total, and I set it initially to 0. And now I've got a loop. While I is less than 5, I'm going to say empty list dot append I. So it's going to put whatever the variable of I is, right? So as I loop through this, the values of I should be, because I'm going to increment at the end, so it's going to go up. So it's going to start off at 0, and then the list will go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So that's what's going to be in my list. Now what I'm doing is I'm doing a running total of the numbers in my list. So it's going to do a sum at the end of all the things that are in the list, and it will sum up 0 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and then that'll be it. Okay? Okay, now another important point. You can perform operations on an element in a list just as though it were any other variable or object of its type. So you can see what I mean by that is I'm telling VPython to reference the ith member of empty list. And then see, I'm just adding it, right? So the values in empty list are numbers. And so I can add or subtract or multiply or divide or perform any other mathematical operation that I would do with a regular number just like that. And all I have to do is make sure that I refer to it with the proper syntax, empty list, square bracket I, in square bracket, right? And then I can put any number, any list member in there, as long as I reference it correctly. Okay, so let me show you this code. Here's all the things that I was talking about for the empty list bit. Okay, here's the empty list part. And then I'm telling it to output some things that you can see how the list works. And this is the length command, length of empty list, and you can see that how many it's got all along the way. I could also tell it to take this print command and put it inside my loop so that that value changes, right, as time goes on. And I can run the code. And you can see that it gets updated. The number of elements in the empty list gets updated with every iteration of the loop. And it grows, right, because I'm using the append command through each iteration. And then at the end, this is the things that are in empty list, and then throughout the operation. I kept a running total of the numbers. Okay, so that just emphasizes some of the ideas and concepts that they talked about kind of quickly in some of those VPython videos. I hope that that clears things up for you if you were confused, and I'll see you later.